All right, welcome in everyone. UGA Football Live with JC Shelton. That is former Georgia tight end Arthur Lynch, a man who has played in clean old-fashioned hate. I'm glad you could be on here, give us some perspective, Artie. But we're going to start it out with some CFP reactions here. Well, of course, we'll get into in-depth with Georgia Tech, some college football pick 'em at the end of today's show as well. Artie, Georgia moves up to number 7, okay, from 10. And technically they are the 8th seed and would host 9 seed Tennessee in Athens for a first round playoff game if it were to happen today. We know it won't. We still got Georgia Tech. You've still got SEC championship against either Texas or A&M next week. What are your thoughts on the CFP rankings here? Do you see anything that's a little odd, and what do you think about Georgia possibly hosting Tennessee?
I'm not going to reiterate my feelings about Penn State because I know we talked about them in that kind of situation last week. So
we hammered the Nittany Lions for like 20 minutes last week. So sorry.
And I'm generally like a Penn State fan, but a Northeast. Like I'm not mad that they do well. I think at this point it's like we don't have to relitigate that. So I think Georgia at 7, right? I give Notre Dame a lot of credit. I actually think Notre Dame's a very good football team. I know that loss was so bad. I mean, truly a historic loss. But I thought that Army team was good against that kind of offense and that kind of environment. Like, I think there's a history of those offenses, punching above their weight. I think West Point's a good program. I did not think that game was going to go the way that it did. And I know people are like, oh, it's Army. Like, I don't think people give enough credit to the service academies when they're rolling like that, right? So I actually think Notre Dame's pretty good, and I do like their quarterback a lot. So I'm less mad about them at 5 than I am about Penn State at 4. Miami at 6, I mean, it is what it is. I think they're probably going to fall before it's all said and done one more time. But I think Georgia they've got 2 losses. So I think for where they sit, I think that makes sense, right? Because they're the best 2-loss team. I think you could make an argument that they're one of the top 3 teams in the country. And I think if a few other things go their way and they only have 1 loss, they're probably number 2 in the country right now. You know what I mean? But they have 2 losses, so you can't justify putting them against a 1-loss Ohio State, a 1-loss Texas. I think you could justify putting them ahead of 4, 5, and 6, but I think ultimately they have 2 losses, so they are where they should be.
Okay, I thought they kind of landed where we thought they were. We talked about 7, 8, somewhere in there, because what we've learned this year is that the strength of schedule, the committee does not know how to properly evaluate it, and they just kind of get caught in corners to where they give you a perception of, hey, this is how we evaluate this team, when there's another team with better metrics and a better strength of schedule. Yeah, they might have 1 more loss to a top 25 team, top 15 team, something like that. That has to matter for something. So considering that and how they don't really know how to work strength of schedule, I think 7 is fine. I mean, that's what we thought we were going to go. Now, and you made a good point there that I want to reiterate, which is the committee could have just put Georgia at 4 and nobody would have batted an eye. It would have been a situation where you could actually say, hey, we're rewarding strength of schedules. Set yourself up for success before next week rankings and then Selection Sunday when you have to defend certain teams because you put them in for strength of schedule. That's how you would – I mean, if I'm the playoff committee, that's what I'm thinking right there. How do we set ourselves up for success at the final weeks? But I could see them at 4. I mean, heck, they beat Texas on the road. You could even put them at 3. I don't think it would be horrendous, but it is 2 losses. I get it, whatever, if we're going off the win and loss column. Interesting to me, the Tennessee situation. Obviously, it's not going to look like this, more likely, right? Because Georgia Tech this week, and then, of course, the SEC championship. I do want to say that, hosting a team in Athens would be awesome for Georgia because they play so well in that stadium, and then having a night atmosphere, and that might be one of the best atmospheres ever. Maybe the first playoff host.
Dude, it would be so sick.
Dude, and I would and then – yeah, dude, it would kind of like being, going if Bama was to host one, or if like if LSU was in a position to host one, How crazy would that environment be? Like, so I think going on the road, man, to an SEC team is going to be straight up bonkers for some of these guys. Like,
I totally agree. I think look, this is why I wanted the expansion. This is why I think the expansion ultimately will be good for college football, because it gives, I mean, look, like, let's just take a look, take a step back, take your like Georgia lenses off and just put your like strictly college football lenses back on. Like, I'm not saying that SMU is going to win a national championship, but SMU got the death penalty in the 1980s, right? And they are now back in a position, right, where it's like they could win a national championship, no doubt about it, right? Are they going to? Probably not. But it's like the fact that they're going to be able to, like, I don't know, probably maybe host a game, or, in Dallas in their stadium, right? Like, I think this is why everyone loves college basketball, March Madness, because it gives you like crazy matchups that you never really see otherwise. And granted, they're all neutral. So I actually think the fact that there's a home and away aspect to this tournament is even cooler. But, typically everyone is home during Christmas break. Everyone's going to migrate back to Athens for a home game in the playoffs where a national championship is on the line. Like, to me, that makes college football that much better, right? And there's going to be like 4 of those games across the country. I think a couple of them are probably going to be on SEC stadiums. So I don't know. I'm pumped because I think as a college football fan, you could have your own particular team, but if you just like turning on a Saturday night or Friday night, whatever this game's going to be, and seeing good football, it's like, that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And then SEC race mentioned earlier, but I want to go through them all here. Texas and Texas A&M, that's in College Station. That is a play in the SEC championship game. And for A&M, that's a play into the playoff game, basically. ACC, you mentioned that they're SMU. They're high as they are because they've already clinched a berth in the ACC championship game, their first year in that conference. They're looking like they're going to play Miami. Miami has to beat Syracuse. If Syracuse beats Miami, it's Clemson, and Clemson's sitting there right there at 12. Boise State's got the group of 5 bid right now. And then Big 12 is really interesting because, and I wrote about this a couple of times for Athlon Sports, check us out, this week. The Big 12 is ridiculous. 9 teams are still in play for the Big 12 championship game. And there's like 3 different tie scenarios for – it's a whole situation. We don't know exactly who's going to end up there. Chaos this week in that conference. So that's where we kind of stand there. And there's a real chance too, Artie, which is crazy to think, which is kind of why I like it. But number 25 Colorado could be in the playoff in 2 weeks. They could somehow or another, because they're tied for first. They need some help, obviously. Get into that game, right? To beat whoever they're playing.
I'm so mad they lost. I knew they were going to, too. I was just like, I know, I love the Dion train. I think it's hilarious. And there's an outside chance it's not going to – I know they just got the quarterback, but I think there's a good chance he could be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys in like 2 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Dude, yeah, because Durr's leaving, Hunter's leaving, but they did get a commitment from Julian Lewis, who you're talking about.
Right, but we'll see. That's a different topic for the offseason. But like, I just think like you want to see these weird storylines, like in the fact that we get these games like before Christmas too, like, is awesome. You know what I mean? And so I don't know. I'm just looking at this top 25, right? South Carolina is playing good football, right? Like, what if South Carolina beats Clemson, right?
Yeah.
So do they jump Alabama and they sneak in at 12, right?
They got to, because if you're judging like the best teams now, South Carolina's got to be up there because they're playing 100%. So well now, right? And talking about that game, we're going to go into some rabbit holes here. I just wrote about this game, so I got some info on it.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
So Clemson lost a starting lineman against Pittsburgh, right? His replacement, who played last week and started last week in their cupcake game against the Citadel, which they won like 51-14, he's now out for the remainder of the season with a torn ACL, right? So you're playing the second best pass rushing team in the SEC on Saturday with a lot of questions on your front. So you're going to have backups playing in there, trying to get cohesiveness in a couple of days here. And you got to play in the Palmetto Bowl, which could be a playing game. And in South Carolina, this is one of the biggest games in that program's history. Think about it. They're not going to SEC championship. They win this game depending on how, they need help, obviously. Sitting there at 15? But that would be incredible for them and Shane Beamer and that because the schedule they've played has been ridiculous. Not Georgia's, but it's been ridiculous. It's up there, top 10 strength of schedule. I mean, that would be an incredible win for that program, really program defining. Let's talk before we get to Georgia Tech specifically. Let's go injury updates. Several big ones here. Trevor Etienne, he's doubtful, still expected to be out with that rib bruise. Ernest Green, arm injury. I know Monreal Freeling has come in at left tackle and played really well. And that, honestly, from what I see, just my opinion, the offensive line, now that we know they've played better statistically, but they look better with him at left tackle. I don't know if even if Ernest comes in, where do they put him? Do they try to still get him in there? Still, really athletic, good player. But he's been playing banged up, and with Monroe in there healthy, he's kind of taken him to a better level here, right in the moment where you want to be playing really well on the offensive line. Dylan Bell, he's doubtful. Kristen Miller, doubtful with that shoulder. Anthony Evans, questionable, still got a hammy he pulled in Florida. I remember that happened. I was like, man, that's going to bother him all season. Branson Robinson and Roderick, they've been out for weeks. They're questionable now. So they're both back at practice, taking some reps. Let's see if they end up playing on Friday night. So let's get it clean, old-fashioned hate. And we're going to feature – my dad's been hounding me to give him a shout-out. I'm just going to say this already. Hounding me. Like, when are you going to get a shout-out the old man? Pops. All right, there we go. Here's his comment. Go Dogs. There he is.
Wait a minute. Is he a Tech guy?
No, absolutely not. No.
I thought you just needed a lead up to clean old fashioned hate.
I did.
To, what am I going to give my dad a shout out? It's like, oh, is his dad a bumblebee? What's going on, dude?
Dude, he's going to love that. No, he's not. And I did lead you into it. And I saw the comment there, and I
saw the Shelton go dog. So I was like, okay, maybe not. I got you.
Anyways, moving on. Yeah, we'll redo that. Can we reclip that, producer? Thank you. Clean old-fashioned hate. 71, 41, and 5. That's Georgia leading the series, folks. And it always surprises me already when I look at that margin each year, because I kind of forget the numbers, and then I go back in every year, and it's just it's a much larger margin than you would expect for a heated rivalry. But Tech has won 4 matchups since 2000. Georgia's absolutely been dominating. History time with Artie. This is where I want to go. Arthur Lynch, former Georgia tight end. He's played in this game. He's bled in this game, probably, right? I want to go back to November 30th, 2013. All right. Georgia pulls off a double overtime win against the Yellow Jackets, 41-34, one of the most memorable games in this series history. Can you take us back and paint us a picture, Artie?
100%, Coach, 100%. So if people, 2013 was like an emotional roller coaster from start to finish. We lost a nail biter to Clemson, College game day, top 5 matchup opening the season, lost by 3. Then we reeled off 4 straight wins. LSU, top 10 matchup, South Carolina, top 10 matchup, beat North Texas pretty handily at home in the rain. And then we had when we beat Tennessee on the road. But basically every game we were just losing guys, and not just like a bruised rib situation. Like, our knees were made of paper mache, right? It was like everyone's knees were going. And so as the season progressed, I think we were like 8-4. If you guys will remember, that was the Hail Mary game in Auburn. We would have been 9-3 going into the game. We were 8-4, 7-4. We would have been 9-4, 9-3 if we would have beat Auburn. Auburn had the lucky, the miracle and Jordan Hare or whatever. Anyway, long story short, we're going into this game against Georgia Tech. And if people, history lesson, we lost Aaron Murray in the Kentucky game, senior night at home, his last home game. His last pass ever in Sanford Stadium and ever as a college quarterback was a touchdown to none other, yours truly.
Yeah, boy.
312 Dino ran a 5-yard in, 3-by-1, caught the ball, touchdown, too easy, beat Kentucky pretty handily, but we lost Murray. And so that was Hudson Mason's first college start ever. And pretty sure Keith Marshall was out with a knee injury. I think we had Michael Bennett, we had Chris Conley, but pretty much everyone else was like out.
Todd was banged up too. Todd was banged up from the I think Kentucky game was his return, kind of, right?
Todd was banged up. He also had way too much stuffing at Thanksgiving because I remember him weighing in right before the game, and he weighed 244 pounds, which is insane.
Holy crap!
Oh yeah, that's a fact. And he ended up having one of the best college performances I've ever seen. Just no one really cared about it because it was like, 8-4 versus like 6-6 Georgia Tech. But long story short, we go down like 20-0 in the first half, right? We couldn't do anything. We were playing at Bobby Dodd Stadium. We're down big. We're kind of demoralized because, we don't have Murray. We really couldn't really answer for their like outside rushers, defensive ends. They had a guy named Jerry Atachu, who was a good player, played for several years in the league, second round pick. We just couldn't really block them that well, and they had a really good scheme for us in the first half. And then we kind of regrouped. And the one thing I do love about this team, even though we only went like 8-5 or 8-4 that season, whatever it was, is like we were like a resilient bunch, right? We were constantly coming from behind and punching above our weight. If you looked at our roster, right, and we come out at halftime, I think it's 21-0. And I'm pretty sure we score 21 unanswered points. And we just go from being like dead to, okay, we got ourselves a game. And then obviously tied, I think we were at 28-28 maybe, or 31-31. I forgot what the score was going into overtime. But this is where this was one of the many instances of playing on the same field as Todd Gurley that I knew that he was not of the same, species as us normal mortals on a football field. And as you guys all know about what the rules are in college football, you basically start at like the 20 or 15 and you basically like set it down to try to score. And I'm pretty sure that Todd ran, I think he started at 25. I'm pretty sure Todd had like 5 carries for 50 yards and 2 touchdowns in overtime. We just ran the ball every time with Todd. And we ran like zone away and then power, like 2-back power. And you can go watch the film, and it was just like run after run after run. And actually, it was the game where I like not broke my back, but like initially hurt my back on a 3rd down and 8. I ran like it was like a 4 verts, but we inverted. So I went out, and then Michael Bennett or Rhett McGowan went in. We kind of crisscrossed. I jump ball, caught it, and I landed on my back. So like I was in so much pain, like so much pain. I was in tears, just like playing. But like I was like, please, let's just not throw the ball. Let's just keep running Todd. And so I remember just the last play of the game, I blocked down. Just threw my body on the defensive end, backside backer, and I just see Todd's big ass moving. And I could feel him coming off my ass. And sure enough, he gets in. We win the game. Awesome win. But taking like a big step back and just talking about the rivalry of Georgia Tech, like Kirby's done a really good job of this because he's a Georgia guy. And Mark Richt did a really good job of this because I think he came from like the Miami-Florida State rivalry where he like understood the importance of that in-state, like the raw like hatred that comes with it. And that was something that we learned very early on as Georgia players, particularly me who came from out of state, was like, do not sleep on this game, right? Like winning is an expectation. You never want to lose because the feeling of that loss to this particular team will like crush your soul and it will live with you for the entire year, right? And just some like a representation of the state, right? Like always figure out what color tie the governor is wearing because he will always tell you who he's rooting for. And that governor is always wearing a red tie, right? University of Georgia is a red and black state. It's a Bulldog state. And so it always felt great being in the locker room, particularly in Bobby Dodd, when the governor came and gave the governor's cup to us, right? And I always thought, Shelton Stevens, may he rest in peace, who was the one who actually presented the trophy, who got it from the governor, and then ultimately Shelton gave it to us in the locker room. But it's just one of those things, like as a Massachusetts guy, like you learn right away. You're like, you have to beat Tech. And that particular game was special because, we had nothing to play for, but we had everything to play for, right?
Yeah.
And everything was pride. And I think that's when you have a bunch of guys in a locker room that you love, respect, and that you're willing to lay it down the line for, because even though we weren't going to the SEC championship and we are going to go play another Gator Bowl, we were like, we're not losing this game. And Hudson Mason, Stones, man, just put his you-know-what on the table. It was like, let's go in the second half. Todd Gurley, I mean, it was a cool experience, and that's one I won't forget, right? And one I think often of.
Yeah, Hudson made 22-36, 299, 2 touchdowns, a pick. But Todd Gurley, 20 carries, 122, 3 touchdowns, and 4 catches, 36 yards in the touchdown. That's a Todd Gurley game right there.
Dude.
Friend of the show. Friend of the show.
Friend of the show. Dude, at some point, who's ever listening, go just look up his stats from overtime. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's 5 carries, 50 yards, 2 touchdowns. We did not even, I don't even think, attempt to pass. We're like, we're just going to run it with Todd until he gets in the end zone. And we did twice.
Dude,
it was awesome.
Love that. I love that. And hey, you mentioned it there. It's kind of like nothing to play for. I'm not saying Georgia Tech has nothing like season-wise to play for, but it looks that way because you're not in the ACC championship. You've already hit a bowl game. You're going to get a bowl game. So what do you want? A better bowl game, I guess? I don't know if that's a huge deal to them. They're bowling either way. So this is kind of the stamp on the season. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what Brent Key has done, which has kind of revitalized this rivalry, really, after the Jeff Collins fiasco, it's been a steady progression. You step in as interim in 2022 and you play in this matchup, as a former Tech offensive lineman, lose to Georgia 31-14. Georgia started slow in that game in Athens, if you remember. They obviously go on to win the national championship, but Tech finishes 5-7 that year. Wasn't Key's doing, it was interim. And then the next year in Atlanta, Tech 31-23, 8 points against a really, really good Georgia team that should have been in the playoff. They finished 7-6, and now they're here at 7-4. So steady progression. This team's going to be around for a long time. And kind of getting to the nuts and bolts of this team just a little bit, what to expect this year. They're not going to jump off the stat sheet. That's not how Tech plays football, right? 69th in scoring offense at 28 per game. Buster Faulkner, obviously former Georgia assistant, calling the plays, scheming things up. I think he does a really good job. When they took down Miami, and I watched a lot of that game, man, just long, methodical drives. You're looking at different sets almost every play, but they do have, that read option attack with Haynes King who can run the ball. They're also – and they started doing this when Haynes King started battling that shoulder injury, and he's just an absolute game. They can't even get him off the field. He's like, no, I'm going to play because my legs are so good. Like still, run, but the throws might not be there because there's a throwing shoulder injury. So they got a freshman quarterback, Aaron Philo from Bogart, right? It's familiar with the Bulldogs. Come on. And they're kind of using a 2-quarterback system when he's throwing the majority of the passes, which is just really interesting because it doesn't work a lot, and they stinking beat Miami with it.
Yeah, what you can tell this is a team that is coached by an offensive lineman, right? Because they're tough, they're disciplined, and they just know their assignments, right? And like football can be people can make football a very complex game, and we have millions of hours of content has propped up the football media, whether it be high school, college, or NFL. But at the end of the day, it's very simple. Like if you block, you tackle, you play good special teams. Like more often than not, you're going to put a good competitive team on the field. And I think the one thing that Georgia Tech has the benefit of is even if they're always going to have talented football players in that program because of the state in which it's in the city in which it's in, right? I think this guy Brent Key, one key thing here that we're not really talking about, which is the same reason why I think Kirby has been so good against Georgia Tech, is like Brent Key's a Georgia Tech guy, right? And Kirby's a Georgia guy. And so like there's an emphasis that they're going to put on this game to get their guys ready to play. So, and I think that's what I was trying to allude to earlier, and what Coach Rick did a really good job of, which is why Coach Rick had a really good record against Georgia Tech, is like, this was never like, an annoyance to get to the next phase, right, of the season. It was this game matters. This game is important. And we're going to put the same emphasis on this game as we're going to put when we play a Clemson at Alabama and LSU. And, when you do that, as the University of Georgia, who's going to have just more talented football players and more resources than Tech, you should be dominant, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that Georgia Tech players and Brent Key is telling that they know this, right? And so I think, to your point, JC, I think they finally have something to look forward to in the fall in Atlanta on Georgia Tech's campus because of Brent Key and those guys and Hanks King and the folks that you talked about. But I definitely would not sleep on this game because it would make Georgia Tech's like decade if they were just like, actually, you know what? We're gonna give Georgia a third loss, right? And as they go into the SEC championship game, so yeah, I think it's a big one this weekend. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, and you made the points I was going to bring up if we didn't, which was how many guys on this Georgia Tech staff have played in it. The same thing on the other side. So I think that really helps not sleepwalk against a 4-loss team on November 29th, Black Friday, right? So you can't, and I don't think they will because of those reasons. Moving on, just offensive real quick. So I noted the 2-quarterback system, Haynes King and Aaron Philo there. It's not necessarily when the other comes in, he's going to pass. They do a little bit of both. They keep you guessing. I think that's really important for that 2-quarterback system to where you can't be, just know exactly if it's a pass or run, basically. Philo had 7 carries for 57 yards last week against NC State in that comeback win. King, on the other hand, he's only had 9 passes in the last 2 games, but he's had 28 carries, 2 touchdowns. So you never really know what you're going to get there. They also have a good running game behind Jamal Haynes. He's a tough back, 717 on the year, 5.5 average, 9 touchdowns. If they're going to pass it, they're going to go to Malik Rutherford or Eric Singleton. Those 2 are the leaders. They got 5 touchdowns total combined. Defensively, they're not great. It's a stat sheet thing. Already they play up to their bigger competition. They lose to the teams you think they should be. That's kind of how they went this year. That's kind of the signs of a rebuilding program to me. But linebacker Kyle Efford, he's their guy. He's that middle linebacker, calls the plays. He's everywhere on the field. 61 tackles, 3 sacks. Amari Harvey, he's an Auburn transfer at cornerback, 54 tackles, a pick, 2 pass breakups. He's leading there. And then defensive line, Romello Height. He's going to have a big job against this really, really big Georgia front who's been playing better the recent weeks. He's got 2.5 sacks on the year. When I talk about hot and cold for this team, that's what we see. I think they're going to be on the hot side of things against Georgia because of the reasons we talked about. And they allowed 34 to North Carolina, right? A struggling North Carolina team, and they held Miami to 23. It's like, and that's Cam Ward. Cam Ward had a huge day in that game. Cam Ward had like 340 for 3 touchdowns, no picks. Had a fumble last second. He was just trying to make something happen, and the protection broke down. But that's kind of a testament to how this team can play up. When they're on, they're having a good day. They make things competitive, even without a great front, right? They don't have these huge, talented guys yet up front that compete with Georgia. They don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, and it's probably not going to be. It's not going to be a major drop off to me, right, on the field, but it should be. But it's just kind of how they play, right?
Yeah, no, I think you make a good point. That's what makes them scary, right, is like you kind of look at them and you're like, in no world should this team beat a Georgia. Miami still makes sense because I think Miami's still young and they don't quite have the depth. But I do think from from an upfront perspective, Miami, Cristobal knows how to recruit and develop offensive linemen. And Miami physically looks bigger than Georgia Tech, or at least did when I watched some of those games. But that's the scary thing I think about a game like this is like there's a lot of emotion in it, right? I'll never forget when our boy got in a fist fight in the
George
Pickens.
Pickens. George
George
Pickens
Pickens.
took a Georgia Tech cornerback for a ride into a brick wall, and it was one of the most memorable moments.
Took him in for about 8 rounds after he threw him out the club. You know what I mean? So it's like, if this were the old coach or even like the Paul Johnson, like end of those years, I would not be worried. But I do think and Kirby will do a good job of this, but I don't think you can sleep on this team because if nothing else, those players in the Georgia Tech locker room believe that they can beat Georgia, right? Because they know that if they play their best football, they can go take down a top 10 team. Now, I'm not equating University of Miami to University of Georgia in the sense of they're the same caliber, but I am in the sense of I'm a college football player. Hey, I took down a top 5 team in Miami, right? The mighty U, like whatever. Like that's how you start thinking about it as a 20, 21, 22-year-old kid. And Brent Key, that's what he's saying. He's like, if we could take down Miami, we could take down Georgia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what a good coach does. But that doesn't mean I don't think they're going to win, but I do think they're going to put up a fight for sure.
And with that, perfect timing. We'll get into predictions. I'll go ahead, or you can round it out. We mentioned that environment's going to be a huge factor. It was against Tennessee, procedural penalties galore. I'm wondering how that's going to translate to this game. It's a huge rivalry. You get to go to Sanford at night with your 93,000 closest friends. How does that translate to a Black Friday game? I think it remains to be seen. We'll see. On the field, Tech's they're gonna try to run that recipe for an upset on the road, right? Which is keep the ball away from Beck. Now, what I mentioned in that game against Miami and how Ward had a huge day, he did, but he wasn't on the field for much, right? I mean, even when he was electric, and they really didn't have an answer. But they won by keeping the ball away from him with those long, methodical drives. They're going to try to run the stinking rock, hit passes when they're open, and their run game is critical for their success to get people's eyes moving in the wrong spot, which Georgia, they have been doing, right? They get caught here and there. Now, consistently, they're going to make things hard on Tech, but when shots are open, Georgia Tech has hit them. So look out for that. I think their recipe is to keep Beck on the sidelines when he is in, try to force some mistakes, which has been his problem this year. He's been a lot better since Ole Miss. Hasn't thrown the ball away to the other team, right? The execution has been much better. I think receiver play and offensive line play are a huge part of that, right?
I think that.
Mm-hmm. Right. All right. Now, if the receivers can kind of stay consistent without dropping balls, which was, it's been better since Ole Miss. It's one of those things that we have no answer for. But that's another part of this game. You have to make the catches when they're made, right? I think Georgia offensively, they're playing well, probably at the best of the season, I think. And that's what Kirby Smart teams and championship teams do. They play better at this part of the year. Defensively, stop the run game. Man, I think up front, and this takes me back to Georgia Tech and Notre Dame. Georgia Tech, usually plays up to their opponents. I think that front for Notre Dame really caused them a lot of problems, and it kind of ran away at the end of that game. That's kind of what I see here. I think Dogs win 34-20. All right, closer game into the end, and then Georgia kind of pulls away with that run game, and the defense gets off the field.
Yeah, I like. Look, I do think I think it's going to be just like not like a heavyweight fight, but just like I think it's going to be physical. I think it's going to be a physical football game. I think it's going to be a lot of emotion. When's the last time there's been a night game on Friday night in Sanford Stadium?
Dude, I read that stat earlier this season when we were kind of looking ahead to this game. I think when the kickoff time got announced, and I can't remember it. I mean, we can look it up real quick as you're going. I'll try to produce JC here.
I think Tech beat Georgia in Sanford at like a noon game on a Friday. When
Was that
Stafford's
2016? No. Oh,
no, I think it was 2008. Paul Johnson's first year.
maybe.
I
Let's
think
see.
that was a Friday. But look, I think Athens is going to be an absolute zoo. Friday night during break, I think people are going to be like, yeah, I just know the students who be like, oh, mom, dad, thanks for the clean laundry, thanks for the good food. Like, I'm going back to school so I can like party all day Friday and then late into the night Saturday and not be hungover on a Sunday with class on Monday, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's how the kids are thinking about it. And anytime you got an excuse to have a night game in that stadium, it's gonna be rocking.
So last time regular season game on a Friday night, it was against Georgia Tech, but it was in 1994.
Was Bobo a quarterback?
I think so, right?
Where's the Zion? I think it might be Bobo.
That's hilarious, dude. Full circle. Yeah. Life is a flat circle.
Oh my God, you have no idea. And it only gets the older you get, the smaller it gets. So,
yeah. But hey, 19.5 point spread. I totally forgot to mention that 19.5 point spread. Obviously, mine 34-20. I think that's too many points for this game. I just wanted to give that to you before you finished up.
I think Tech covers. I like that as well. I think it's like 31-20, and just I think there'll probably be some fumbles here and there. It'll be huge hits. There's probably a couple of ejections, right? I think Hangs King will be like fired up and probably gas us a little bit here or there. But ultimately, I think Georgia. I think Kirby just he gets what this game is, right? And obviously, Georgia has so much to play for. But I do think, and you and I spoke about this in the preseason about how we felt about Georgia Tech and how this is a program that is getting better. And I think they believe now, right? Mm-hmm. They just need more talent and they need more depth and they need more consistency. And I don't think they're going to, I don't think they'll have enough to pull the upset, particularly on the road on a Friday night at 7:30 national TV. I don't see it, but you never know. But I like Georgia probably 31-20, and it'll probably be even close going into like mid third quarter, right? Mm-hmm. But Georgia will fare it, and I do think Carson Beck will have a good game. He'll continue to play well, and I think the offensive playmakers will continue to play well.
Yeah, he's at Sanford. He's an animal, and I love to see him run a little bit too. Now, be careful with SEC champ coming up, but would love to see that.
He's tough, man. Yeah, he's tough. I think he is, but
I think he is too. He showed that. Let's move into college football. Pick 'em. Week 14, our last regular season pick 'em of the year. I love it, man. I'm at 31, 28-1. We're over 50%. That's all I care about. Artie, you haven't picked in a while because you were busy doing your ABCs. Artie, 20 and 14-1. Still a really good percentage. Let's get into it. Notre Dame goes on the road at USC, right? USC is one of only like 5 teams in the FBS to have a fourth quarter lead in every game, and they have 5 losses, which is just
that's brutal.
Crazy. But that shows you, I think this game probably should be close. Notre Dame hasn't played a team with this much talent since A&M. Seriously, look at their schedule. It's just, Army, we like them. Don't have the upfront talent. USC should. Those should be close. And Notre Dame has offensive line that's been shuffling all year. 7.5 points. Notre Dame's a road favorite. That's a lot of points, man. USC, I'm taking the spread. They might win. And that would be good for college football if Notre Dame's on the playoff to me.
I like USC in this to cover as well. Dude, go give me your pick for Tennessee Vanderbilt because I like USC.
Tennessee, 10.5 points on the road at Vanderbilt. Has there been a bigger game for Vanderbilt?
No,
I mean, you can say Alabama, but this is an in-state rivalry.
I'm taking Vandy, 100%.
You're to win or points?
Definitely the point, 10.5.
Yeah,
you don't even like Tennessee.
Hey, don't say that. I don't like Tennessee against the best teams in the country. Man, hey, Tennessee hasn't been a great road team. They have. That's one thing we can definitely
Does
say.
Vanderbilt still have that quarterback that like?
Of course they do, dude. He could break his leg, and he's going to roll out with a scooter. He's going to let him take snaps.
I'm taking Vandy 100%.
All right. I just because they haven't been a great road team, we'll go.
Dude, 10.5 a lot.
We'll go with the home dog 10.5, and I wouldn't be surprised if that line moved a little bit. South Carolina, Clemson, the Palmetto Bowl could be a play-in game this year, dude. Clemson, they need Syracuse to beat Miami to get an ACC championship. If they beat number 15 South Carolina, they should move up a little bit, and at least because they're the first team out right now. So Clemson, huge game for them, play-in game for both teams, possibly, depending on how everything else shakes out. Clemson's getting 2.5 points at home. The last time they played in Death Valley, Carolina pulled off a 1-point upset. Carolina, we talked about the offensive issues. If you missed the start of the show, I'll mention it here again in case while we're talking about this game. But Clemson is missing 2 offensive linemen now. They don't know who's going to play exactly the left tackle spot. I know that for a fact. Swinney announced today that they figure this out in a couple days against a team in South Carolina who has the second most SEC sacks in 39. Doesn't really shake up well when you look at that and you look at how Carolina's been playing, the schedule they've played. They've been in some tough battles. Clemson hasn't with their schedule. It's setting up for a South Carolina road win in this one already. It's a noon kick. That's what I'm feeling right now. I'm going to take South Carolina just to win.
So you like South Carolina outright?
Yeah.
Clemson at home. That Clemson's that's a tough place to play. I've played there, but if it was home at South Carolina, it would be a no-brainer for me. But South Carolina, dude, they because Beamer's such a good recruiter, even guys that leave, like they just don't have a bunch of dudes on the team. It's insane. You know what I mean? And not just like it's not just like, oh, here's the quarterback, but like they'll have like a third string receiver will make a play, and you're like, damn, that dude can move. You know what I mean? He'll have a guy come off the edge, like that guy looks like an NFL talent. And then next thing you know, 5 years from now, he'll be like, a Pro Bowler, defensive end or something. And I think that's the one thing that always makes me worry about South Carolina is because they always have the ability to, like, on any given day, just be like, all right, our guys are just going to play like studs. And they do. So I'm going to go with you. I like South Carolina because it's 2.5. I guess we just got to say to outright win. I know this is just a pick 'em on the spread, but
you can take spread if you want.
I like South Carolina.
Right. We'll give you the points, dude. We'll give you the points. Don't worry about money.
All right.
I like what you said. And another thing, if there's one way to get a defensive front that loves to get after the quarterback out of their spots, is run the stinking rock from your QB. Cade Klubnik can do that, so it'll be interesting. Yep. Lenore Sellis can also do that. So defenses, I think, are going to have a hard day, to be honest, in that one. Auburn, Alabama, Iron Bowl. Bama last week. Just it's absolute devastation, right? And Kalen DeBoer, he's hearing it from Bama fans. Of course he is. If he loses to Auburn, you're going to hear it for months. It's going to be absolute implosion, right? So I think he's going to have a different level of intensity, and if that translates to his players, Alabama should win this game at home, right? Last year almost went to overtime, or Auburn almost won, but 4th and 26 it was from Jalen Milroe, just incredible play. They ended up getting him to the playoff, really. That's the championship. They beat Georgia. 11.5 points Alabama's getting. This Alabama team against an Auburn team that beat A&M and went 4 overtimes last week. They're riding high. They're talking all types of smack. Auburn's players are giving them guys in Tuscaloosa bulletin board material, just true Iron Bowl-esque. I think Auburn keeps it closer than 11.5, and we just we kind of base it on what we've seen from Alabama lately, right? They're trending down. Auburn's trending up. Give me Peyton Thorne and the Tigers to cover. I don't think they win the game.
Look, I don't know, man. I think
it's a hard one.
It's like it's one of those things that I don't know what will happen if they lose to Auburn.
I don't know, man. It's like
Dude,
they've had one win this year listening to the fans.
dude, they've already turned on him. Like DeBoer might as well be 0-10.
Yeah.
So, but I think this is what there was no coach other than Kirby Smart. Let me think about that real quick, about all the coaches in college football. Yeah, I don't think there's one coach in college football who could, other than Kirby, who has the mentality to successfully take over that program and, be as dominant. Like I think Alabama's a good football team. I mean, they beat Georgia, right? Could they be better and more consistent? Definitely, no doubt. Like they should have never lost to Vanderbilt, right? They did not show up to play against Oklahoma. The defense did, but the offense didn't. And DeBoer's an offensive guy, so that lies on the shoulders of him, right? So like that leads me to worry. Like, is he not an attention to detail guy? Is he just like a really good offensive mind, right? Like, so I don't know. I don't know him well enough, but like he's good enough to go be a top 15 team as a first year head coach in the SEC, and they did lose a lot of guys to transfer portal, and he had to bring some guys in. So it's not like it was not like Nick Saban handed him over a golden ticket. He handed him over a really good program with a lot of talent, but. Man, dude, I was listening to some of the things this week on Twitter, and just like I tweeted one guy, I was like, dude, this is insane. These people are out of their minds.
Yeah.
But the pressure is on, and Hugh Freeze, man, like him, love him, got to respect him, and he typically coaches well, and his teams play well in games like this.
Mm-hmm.
Was it 10.5? Was the
11,
spread
11.5? Auburn, it's in Tuscaloosa.
Dude, I hate doing this to my boy Crop because he's a coach at Alabama Pops. Dude, Auburn's covering that spread, dude. 100%.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I think Auburn can win this game, and I'm not even kidding.
No, after last week, it wouldn't be a surprise. Absolutely, man. They should have beat Oklahoma. Auburn should have, right?
Dude,
let's go.
Yeah, I mean, there's no. They'll burn DeBoer's house down.
They might. You talking about bomb threats, dude? They're just going to be people calling in fake ones for days,
dude,
maybe weeks, maybe months.
Those call-ins were wild.
Texas A&M, our last pick 'em here, and we'll get out. Texas 5.5 at College Station at night. So the atmosphere, we already know what that's going to be like. Right, first year this rivalry is in the SEC. I can't remember the last time they played. I know it's been several years at least, maybe multiple. I think I read that one time. Can't remember off the top of my head. But it happens to have SEC championship game implications. The winner of this game will play Georgia in the SEC championship. Texas so my biggest thing here already is the health of Quinn Ewers, obviously banged up. Heard he's going to play. How much does that affect their offense? Will they let him run? Right, and if they do let him run, can he be effective? That's a good way to get that A&M front, which is really talented, probably their strongest part of their team. That's a really good way to get them off their spots and give them some things to look at so they could just pin their ears back. They do have a running quarterback there, Marcel Reed. So that's another kind of wrinkle, right? But if you play good defense, that's where A&M and put them in a position where they have to come back on offense. That's where they just don't have the guys to do it on the outside, I think, to really threaten you down the field and win a one-on-one matchup. So Texas, talent-wise, should win this game. Steve Sarkisian, the way he calls offense against kind of a good defensive front, that's probably a good matchup that Texas like. How does that offensive line play is big. Can you play on the road like this, an environment? Because Texas hasn't really had to in a crazy environment like they're going to face. So those are the big questions. I could see this as like a 3-point game. Could also see it like Texas kind of runs away with it, 17, right? You just don't know what kind of A&M team's going to show up. And I'm kind of leaning Texas here by a touchdown, right? 5.5. It's a good at least by a touchdown. I'm going to go with the Longhorns already.
I got a close buddy of mine. He played football at Brown, and he coaches for Mike Elko. Zach Sparber, awesome guy. Started his coaching career at Bergen County High School in North Jersey, powerhouse up there. Was at Duke for years under Elko. Elko brought him over to TAMU, Texas A&M. So my heart is with Texas A&M, and I do think that we should take a moment and appreciate how good of a job Mike Elko has done at Texas A&M, right? Because talk about a ton of talent that left, right?
Oof.
And I think Jimbo Fisher was a great character of college football, and he needs to get on TV or host a podcast alongside John Gruden for Barstool Sports, or if he wants to come on UGA Football, we'd love to have him, right? But because I think he's an entertaining guy, and he's smart, and he's witty, and he knows a lot about football, but I think his best years as a coach were behind him.
Yep.
And he was not keeping up because
he wasn't keeping up. Nope.
I think you see this turnaround that A&M has done, I think, is a testament to Mike Elko, but also probably a little bit of like it was too far gone with the previous staff. With that said, man, I think Texas is I don't think they're going to sleep on this one. I think they're going to play well. I think Sarkisian knows what's at stake. You know, there might be some gamemanship too. I don't know if he wants to play Georgia again.
You're saying a little just let Arch Manning run it 10 times or 30 times? I mean, what do you think?
You got to think Texas is in the playoff no matter what.
Yeah.
They're in no matter what, right? A&M could still sneak you in because if they win the next two, they're definitely
they got an automatic bid if they win the next two. Yeah.
Right. So I don't know, man. Right. Like I think all things being equal, I like Texas, but I'm not saying that I just think if they lost, they wouldn't be devastated.
Texas. No, I don't. No, you're right, dude. That's part. And so that's on Sarkisian to get his guys not to be thinking about that, obviously.
Right.
What were you going to add?
Right. No, I was just going to say, because like Texas probably still gets in if they win and then lose to Georgia.
Yep.
But they'll be in, they won't have it won't be a great seed.
No, it's going to be a tough
road,
be a tough probably. Road. Unless they're 5 seed somehow, which I don't think.
And think about it, right? If Ewers plays, these games are going to be physical. That's what these rivalry games are. Even if it's like a completely outmatched game, it's always like a competitive game for the first half. It's always physical. So he's going to get hit, right, a couple times. And if he wins and then has to go play a Georgia team, the SEC championship game, which is going to be hungry as shit to win and prove to the country they should be a top 5 team, top 4 team, man, Ewers will be limping in and Texas will be limping into the playoff. So I don't know. I don't think they'll lay a goose egg, but you don't know, man.
No, you don't. And that's kind of the beautiful part of the sport. What I will say is Texas and that offense and Quinn Ewers, they're a quick pass game anyway. You look at the numbers, they don't push the ball down the field. Like everybody watches highlights and they think that's Texas. It's not. It's quick pass game. They like to run the ball. They show you obviously multiple looks, right, and try to get their guys in space. That's what Steve is great at. But if you're thinking about Quinn Ewers and an injury and possibly getting hit too many times, they're going to take that quick pass game to a different level. Like it's going to be as soon as that rocket snapped, he's got that thing out of his hands and he's going predetermined. But if they get into a shootout and it's shot for shot, it's Texas all day because they have the guys on the outside. They have an arm like Ewers. A&M doesn't have that with Marcel Reed yet. He's a stinking true freshman. Maybe one day. I think that's a great place to end it, Artie, and we will end it, man. Clean old-fashioned hate on Friday, Black Friday, after you get your shopping in Athens Sanford Stadium. Georgia, we both like the Dogs to move on to the SEC Championship with a win under the belts, another one. And that we're all going to be back for that game. Of course, will be instant reactions on Friday night. It's going to be a late one. We'll see if Artie is still up. Maybe he'll join us, maybe not. We'll see. But until that time, guys, we appreciate you, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or X, or listening to your podcast. We appreciate it all as always.
Go Dogs.